Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2543. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. I'm founder Mark Green, and I've handed the keys to this car over to Ginger Baker Rust, who's a lifelong enthusiast. Ginger's here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, and buckle up and get ready for a fun ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today, we are coming to you from the beautiful city of Montreal, Canada, with a very renowned motorsports lawyer whose name is Mark Boudreau. Hello, Mark. Welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have it in gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go. Mark, please share something about yourself that most people may not know.
Well, actually, ironically enough, being on a podcast, I've done a music radio show for close to 19 years now.
Really?
It's a rock and roll show where I focus on bands that are on smaller independent labels or are not on labels at all. And I treat them like they were the rock stars that they are.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
I'll definitely have to find out about that and listen to that for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Mark, let me introduce you and tell the people a little bit about you. Have you ever heard of a motorsports lawyer? They do exist. A graduate of Western University's Faculty of Law, Mark Boudreau has always been more interested in the business side of motorsports than harboring any interest in racing himself. This interest led to his founding of Motorsport Prospects, a global online resource providing racers of all types access to information to help them go faster on the track and succeed off of it. Mark applies the same concept of due diligence used in the legal field to the research he conducts both for the Motorsport Prospects directory and for individual clients. He is passionate in ensuring that all racers, their family, and advisors have the information they need to make an informed motorsport-related decision. Mark, let's go a little deeper in the corner and share with us more about your journey into the motorsports world, into the motorsports legal world. How did all this get started?
It all got started. I've always been a fan of racing, and ironically enough, it's the anniversary on May 8th of the death of Gilles Villeneuve, and that was my introduction to racing. Was Gilles Villeneuve, like a lot of Canadians. So I kind of didn't really know too much about it and wondered what this was all about. So that began my journey into Formula One initially, and then all kind of motorsports. And I started to track North American drivers racing in Europe. And back then, before the internet, it was quite difficult to find out who was doing what over there. But I started getting into it, buying the specialist press, and just became really fascinated with the business of how they actually cross the pond and race and how they pay for it. So as things evolved, I go to a lot of races, and I started talking to parents of the kids that were racing. And I would ask them, how did you decide to race for this team? How did you decide, to put your daughter in this series? And I was quite surprised at the answers I got, in that a lot of times their decisions were based not on any kind of research. They were often based on they met somebody at the track who convinced them that that was the team that they should race for, or they knew that team won the previous year, so they figured they must be a great team. And I kind of used to say, if your daughter wanted to become an architect, what would be the process that you would do with her to determine where she would go to school? And, they would tell me, well, we would research, the best architecture faculties in the country. We would look into any potential scholarships. We would go and visit some of the campuses that she was interested in and meet people and talk to the professors and all that kind of stuff before they made their decision. And I used to point out that, well, not possibly, quite, pretty clearly, that the money they spend on their daughter's motorsport career will be much greater than what they would spend on her university career. And yet you put almost no thought into where you're going to spend your money.
Right. Yeah. They just look at the fact that, seems like a great team. And then the team says, hey, just come, we'll sign you. And People hear those
Yeah.
words and it's so misleading. It's so misleading. And,
It is.
and they don't go in with the knowledge, like you said, that they need for the business side of the motorsport. All they can see is my kid's going to have a seat.
Right. And it's glamorous. It's
Right.
exciting. And I realized also that it's not just the young drivers
No.
that are facing that situation. Older drivers that are, for example, very successful. They probably own a company. They have high net worth. They know what they're doing. Let's say they have a cybersecurity company or a biotech company. They're brilliant at what they do,
Right.
and they want to race, but they don't know that much about the industry. All they know is they want to race. They want to race a Ferrari. So it leaves them open to, look, let's be honest, to be potentially taken advantage of. I think it's important that everybody knows what they're getting into, has the information where they can make a proper decision. And then ultimately at the end of the day, it's their decision. I think there was a really real gap in that. So that's the whole point of Motorsport Prospects is to present information in a way that is neutral, independent. And as you mentioned in my intro, I apply due diligence. So the directory, for example, we have, basic free listings, but then the premium listings are vetted, and there's a whole due diligence process that I engage in order to make sure that if a motorsport professional or a team or whatever it is, if they're what I call certified by Motorsport Prospects, that means I've done some research into them. And as best as I can determine, these people are professional. These people can be trusted. These people are the ones that you should probably engage with at the beginning when you're making your decision. And for example, if you're looking for a driver coach, if you're looking for a sponsorship consultant, if you're looking for a physical conditioning coach, people think, that a regular trainer at a gym is sufficient for what they need. But motorsport, as you know, uses a lot of different muscles. It's a different physiological way to, you go through a different physiological experience when you're racing. So neck muscles are extremely important. And if a trainer doesn't understand that, they won't be able to prepare you. So, we have in the listings, we have people that's their specialty. They're fitness coaches who know motorsport. So they'll make sure that you're doing the exercises and the training that will help you when you're in the cockpit.
Yeah.
You need a team.
Yeah.
In your career, in your racing career, and not just a team that goes on the track. You need a team of trusted advisors that can help you as you progress up the motorsport ladder. And trusted advisor is the key. And that is the idea behind Motorsport Prospects. These are people and companies that you can entrust your career with because, we've vetted them. We've made sure that they are legit and they are professional.
Right. Well, and you go beyond that actually with your Motorsports Prospect because your background is in motorsports law. And, people are like, there's really motorsports lawyers? Yes. And they are very, very important. I mean, I know I've leaned on you in some projects that I've worked on and getting your advice on the legal aspect on these things. And again, that is another area besides the partnership sponsorship area, the business side of it, that man, you better have your ducks in a row on the legal, with the contracts, with the partnership contracts, with the team contracts, with endorsements and those kinds of things. Talk a little bit about kind of what that entails, what motorsports law entails being a motorsports lawyer with, that ton of specialty.
It's key because, for example, as you mentioned, contracts, a contract is obviously very customized to whatever your situation is. Motorsport is a very niche activity, and it has some very specific legal requirements or legal technicalities that maybe a regular standard commercial lawyer, for example, would not be aware of. It's important to deal with somebody who either specializes in sports law, with motorsport laws being an important part of it, or alternatively is a lawyer who's also a race driver. And if you can get both, the two of them combined, that's perfect. So It's a niche, definitely a niche, but ironically enough, outside of Motorsport Prospects, I'm in the process of launching, and we've already done kind of the initial groundwork, a networking forum specifically catering to motorsport lawyers. Part of what I'm doing with Motorsport Prospects is making sure that drivers get quality professional representatives that, on the legal side of things. But I'm also working to help lawyers who either are involved in motorsport law or want to get involved in motorsport law, as well as law students, the opportunity to network and learn from each other, especially on the different sides. So, for example, motorsport in North America and motorsport in Europe are, in a lot of cases, quite different.
Very different.
And it's and the cool thing about it is, and there was just a conference in Indianapolis last week called the Racing Attorneys Conference, which brings together lawyers from both sides of the pond, right. And they tend to learn from each other. So we're going to expand on that, and we're going to enable lawyers to, like I said, to network, to learn from each other. I'm hoping to eventually branch out with that and allow and work to have mentors for law students, so that law students who are interested in motorsport law would be able to get a mentor through the forum, and who would help them to, would offer them guidance, career guidance. And so it is a very distinctive sponsorship, for example. It's a very technical area, anywhere from sponsorship on a car, sponsorship on the race suit or the helmet. A lot of that stuff is, it's not standard legal practice. Motorsport insurance is involved in that. There's so many different aspects to it. Just like an accountant is really important for your business, a trusted lawyer who understands what they're doing, who understands the sport, I think is critical, because at the end of the day, as they always say, contracts aren't important when everything's going great.
Right.
Contracts are critical when things are not going great.
Right.
And you better make sure that your contract, whether it's a sponsorship contract, a team contract, whatever it is, you better make sure it's structured in a way that is clear. And there's if any issue comes up, there's a way to resolve that within the contract. Because if not, that could quite literally derail your motorsport career.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, I've leaned on you for some pretty difficult legal questions on some projects that I've been working on. And I want people to know too that, even though you're located in Canada, this is a global effort. When you work with people, myself in the United States and North America, and I've dealt with teams and drivers in Europe, and you do that as well. And so it's a global process. People, I have to remind people, the racing community is, like you said, it's very niche, and it's very small, but you can get tripped up real fast if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, throughout your life, I know that there have been people who have been great inspirations to you. Would you share with us a key mentor who has helped you be successful, and who's been the most influential person in your life?
Well, I would have to say my dad. And one of the reasons I say my dad, aside from all the regular things that, you learn from your dad as you grow up and the advice you get, but one of the things that always stuck with me. So my dad was involved in the film and TV industry. And when he was very young, he was actually, that was his love. That's what he wanted to do. He used to make film on the side. And we're talking in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, wow.
He wanted to make films. He'd do all these little films on the side. I think he was a clerk with a telecom company or something, but he did this on his sides. And then he would volunteer to be to work with a film company. And one year they did the 1964 Canadian Open. And so the first day, my dad was driving the Jeep because they had film cameras on. And so the cameraman would be on the back. My dad would drive them to the different holes and the cameraman would film. The second day, they asked him, do you know how to load the film on the Aeroflex, whatever camera? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So his next day, his job was to load the film. My dad had no idea how to load the film in this camera. He basically took a blanket, put it over his head when they asked him to load the film. He had the manual there and he figured it out. and, prayed that when he handed the cartridge to the cameraman, that it would work.
Oh my
and
God.
luckily it worked. And so his philosophy was, it's the Nike philosophy. Just do it.
Right.
If you don't know how to do it, figure it out. What's the worst that could possibly happen? But if you don't at least give it a shot, the opportunity that you were presented with, you might lose completely. And ironically, with that story, the next day, he was a cameraman.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he just kind of moved on from that. If he had kind of chickened out, and he would be driving the Jeep, and, who knows what would have happened. So sometimes it's scary, and sometimes you're not quite sure if you have all your ducks in a row, but you know what? Just do it. Just give it a shot. And I think a lot of times you surprise yourself in that you realize, yeah, you know what? I could handle it. I was petrified through half of this process, but at the end of the day, it did work out because I took advantage of the opportunity and I just did it.
Well, and even if in that situation, even if you screw it up, you learn from the failure, right? You learn from the screw up, right? And that's
absolutely,
and that's still a win. It doesn't feel like it at the time, but that's still a win because next time, right? That's
a really good point. And I think that's why sometimes people won't take that chance because they don't want to fail, because they think it's failure. So that it's like, well, I failed. But you're right. I mean, every failure is a lesson. I've done so much stuff in my life where not everything worked out. And a lot of what didn't work out, I just learned from it and I pivoted to, something that would work. But if you haven't had a failure, you don't get a chance to learn. And that's really all failure is, right? It's just an opportunity to learn.
Yeah. My favorite quote is success is always one step further than failure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is, it's Ross Braun, luck is preparation waiting for an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many, they're cliches, but they're powerful because they're true.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of challenges and failures and obstacles, could you share with us a difficult challenge, failure, or obstacle that you faced, whether in your personal life or business? And tell us how you overcame that situation. What did you learn?
Well, it's not a particular situation. It's an approach. And we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. And that's the dreaded paralysis by analysis. I tend to be somebody who needs to study every single option out there before I make my decision. And that sometimes can come down to anything from, picking a bag of chips on the grocery shelf. And there's a point where you have to say enough's enough, make a decision, and deal with whatever that decision results in. And it's still sometimes a struggle. We were talking about, like, I'm planning on launching a podcast, microphones. There's 9,000 different microphones. And if I don't catch myself, I will be spending so much time analyzing which microphone that I should get that my podcast would potentially only launch in 4 years. So, that's where the just do it comes in. It's like, look, there's a zillion microphones out there. Just do a quick check, pick one. And if it doesn't work out, just change it after a while. But, I did polos for Motorsport Prospects that I wear that I wear to the track. I spent ridiculous amount of time mucking about with what type of material, how should it look, what color, at the end of the day, nobody cares. They just want to see the idea is they see your logo, and if they recognize you, or if they can seek you out, they're not going to spend a lot of time concerned about the fact that you use this material over that material. So again, you just got to say, okay, you know what is the end goal here? To just get a polo with the logo on it. Just pick something, order it, and just make it happen, and then move on.
Right. Well, part of that process, though, of your paralysis by analysis, though, is actually what makes you a great lawyer, right? Because you have to analyze and research, everything. And same with, marketing and the things that I do. I mean, I can look at something and my brain is going 20 different directions trying to figure out, okay, where's the holes, what's missing, where's the opportunities, where's it going to be? Where's the cons? Where's the failures? Which spoke is going to potentially, jump off, right? And break. And so, so I think it's a good thing to a point, but like you said, there's things that, and I'm like you, I will research and research and research. And then it just comes to a point that I have to make a decision, but I'm also pretty good about like making a decision on the fly, and doing something off the hip. But you're absolutely right. It is a challenge, but you got to know, like you said, you got to, have that breaking point of just knowing, okay, look, I just, I need to go.
That's why timelines are important. Deadlines. You say, I have to launch. I got to get a microphone. Okay. You know what? I will make a decision by Wednesday at the latest.
Right.
Period. And so do all your due diligence, do your research, but knowing that Wednesday is when you have to make a decision one way or another. Deadlines have for me anyways, they're a great tool to force you to do things that you might overanalyze something. It forces you to focus. And, so that helps me with dealing that issue because I'm not saying not to do an analysis. What I'm saying is just don't do an endless analysis where you never actually get anything done.
Right. Make a decision.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a bucket list. And you've talked a little bit about kind of what's in your future, but please share with us what you still would like to accomplish in this next chapter of life.
Well, I have a lot of plans for Motorsport Prospects, and one of the reasons it's called Motorsport Prospects and not, Mark Boudreau Consulting is because I want this to continue on above and beyond my part of it. I want that, we have a lot of interesting plans as far as, anything from live events and webinars and a membership program for drivers that will give them all kinds of advantages. I want the company to exist above and beyond me. I want it to be global. So I'm definitely, looking to grow the company, but at the same time to bring on a partner or two, preferably spread out around the world. So, maybe somebody in the UK or in Europe or in the US. And I want this to be a company that at the end of the day, helps drivers. Look, we all know it's a really difficult business. It's a really expensive business. And ultimately, what Motorsport Prospects is there is to grow motorsport by helping people make the right decisions. And there's information that's out there that a lot of people don't know about. And I want to make sure that anybody who wants to race or is racing gets access to that information. And that's really ultimately what I want to do.
Well, and even for somebody, like me that isn't necessarily, I'm a hobby racer, but, I'm not racing full time or anything like that. But even people like me and the side of the business that I do, this is an important place for me to be able to go to get information as well. Especially with the different projects that you and I have discussed. I mean, the project that I'm working on, we've talked about, okay, I need a Canadian lawyer. I need a U.S. lawyer. I'm talking to a lawyer in Europe, and I've got to understand, all these different aspects and, how different they are. But it goes beyond that. It goes on how they all do business in those particular areas, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's not just for.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's just for racers. It's also for people like myself.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because that is more and more. That's what's happening. I was contacted by a motorsport insurance agent that was looking for a Montreal-based lawyer in order to do some motorsport waivers, and they had to be done in both English and French. And they had to make sure that they were consistent with Canadian law. And I'm starting to get more B2B kind of stuff, more business to business, where, it's somebody often looking for, especially a lawyer, and I'm happy to connect those people. So I do business, what I call B2D, business to driver. And then I'm starting to do a bit more business to business because, again, it's the old story too. It's vetted, right? So if you're looking for a lawyer based in Europe that understands motorsport, and that's the key, you will find them on Motorsport Prospects.
Well, and another thing too that people don't think about is when you have racers coming over from other countries. For instance, I worked with a couple drivers in Europe and they've wanted to come over into the US and even just to do, you'll get some kart experience, dirt experience, and an experience over here in the US, but being able to work with immigration and with their visas and all the different types of visas and the athlete visas and the certain restrictions on that. I mean, again, that is a legal nightmare.
Yeah. It's not the sexy part of the business, but visas is a perfect example where it is a complex, and it's getting even more complex. Even things like moving a car from country to country, transport, there are very specific things that need to be, boxes that need to be checked and regulations that need to be complied with. And, you need somebody who knows what they're doing.
Let's talk about a special car. Tell us about a truly special vehicle, car in your life, and share a great memory or experience you had with that vehicle.
So the first car that I actually fell in love with was, and some people might find this quite funny, but it was a Chevy Cavalier Z24, or I guess as you guys would call it, a Z24. And it wasn't the standard Cavalier. It was actually a hatchback. And it looked cool, but the cool part of it was that it was a standard, it was a stick. And that was my first time I really had the opportunity to drive a stick. And it was a sporty car. It was a fun car to drive. It had one of the nicest stick shifts I've ever used. And that car, it was so much fun to drive. And I will always remember that as, a very special car, just because it brought the joy of driving. Driving that car was not, even driving to go to the, pick up groceries was always a bit of an adventure. And I just absolutely love that thing. It set the tone for everything and anything that I've driven since.
Well, a stick shift now is the best security for keeping your car from falling down.
Exactly. It is. You read so many stories of these people that break into cars and they just stare at it and they're like, I have no idea what to do with this thing.
Like, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, gosh. Let's talk a little car psychology here, getting into your head. If you were a car, what would you be? And more importantly, why? Now, this isn't what you want to be, but instead how you perceive yourself manifested as a vehicle.
I consider myself to be nimble, and on face value, you would think I'm just a kind of a regular guy. But then inside, there's an engine there that is surprising in how powerful it is. Porsche 911s have always been the car that it just ticks all my boxes. And part of the reason that it does is when you look at, you look at a 911, yeah, it's a powerful looking car, but it's small. It doesn't look overly aggressive from the outside, and yet it's nimble and it's fast. And that's kind of how I've always perceived myself. For example, if I'm more of a person that will organize the party and make sure everybody's having a good time than being the center of attention at the party. And that's how I like to be. I like to set the table and cook the meal and then let everybody enjoy it. And it's the same with cars. I like a car that's powerful and fast, and yet doesn't necessarily come across that way at first glance.
Kind of the dark horse, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is an awesome car also, by the way.
Let's go on the ultimate drive. I am writing a blank check for this ultimate drive with no limitations. Now, again, have fun with this question. If I could wave a magic wand and arrange for you to go on the ultimate drive, who would it be with and what vehicle would you be in?
Okay, now, my dream car is a Porsche 930, the slant nose, black. And if I could ever find, I remember when I was a kid, there was a magazine where a guy in Germany had a slant nose 930 with a Porsche 962 race engine in it. Now that would be the car that I would take. Ironically enough, I wouldn't want to necessarily go for my drive in Germany. I'd want to go for my drive in Italy. And the guy that I would like to be Well, in the passenger seat for some of the time, and hopefully in the driver's seat, so you can show me a thing or two, is Mario Andretti. I've always admired that guy. He's driven so many different race cars in his career. I can't even really think off the top of my head what he hasn't driven. And the fact that he's worked with Colin Chapman, and that he's raced, in Indy, he's raced in Formula One, he's raced sports cars in Le Mans, he's won the Indy 500. I mean, to just drive and listen to him tell some of his stories. I literally met him briefly once at the Toronto IndyCar race, and I was in the paddock, and I happened to be going wherever. I guess I wasn't paying attention. I literally collided with him. And of course, I apologized. Then I realized who it was, and then I felt like a bit of a goof. He just laughed, and then he chatted with me for a couple of minutes. He just seemed like a really down-to-earth, cool guy who's living his best life. And, I would love to hear some of the stories. I mean, I've seen pictures of his trophy room, and I mean, I would love to hear some of his stories. And I would like to be on the passenger seat of that slat nose and have him, bomb up and down the highway and show me a thing or two, and probably scare the crap out of me. But yeah, that would be my ultimate. So, it's an American Italian driver with a German car, but driving it in Italy.
Oh, there you go. I like that.
That's about as international as it could be.
I was going to say, I like that trip for sure. Well, we've talked a little bit about your motorsports prospects and how you're using that to help others in the race industry. But let's talk about some of the other ways that you've helped others and given back. Now, this could be in your life or career field.
One of the things that is part of the DNA of Motorsport Prospects is support of motorsport charities. As I was building the directory, I started to look into different charities that were motorsport related. And I was astonished at the amount of amazing motorsport related charities that are out there. And so it's critical for the mission of Motorsport Prospects. Part of giving back is a couple of different things. One of them is supporting these charities. For example, any motorsport charity, a premium listing in the Motorsports Prospects directory there's a cost involved. Charities will not, they will not be charged anything to be there. They will be I haven't launched it yet, but I will be doing a monthly spotlight on a different charity. They don't get the recognition they deserve. I think a lot of people aren't aware of the work that they do. And yet, in a lot of ways, they show how much the motorsport family cares about the community. And so that is one of the things that I think it's really important that, giving back is key, but shining a spotlight on what they do. And hopefully, eventually, I want to do something a bit more than that. I would like to get involved in some of these charities and promoting them and, maybe running events with them. But definitely, there's so many cool charities that are out there that are working with young children, that are working with people with disabilities, that are working with veterans and reintegrating them into society. There's just so many amazing things that I want to make sure that they get the love and attention that they deserve. So that is something that that's an important aspect of Motorsport Prospects. There is there's no financial incentive in any of that. It's just pure gratitude for what they do.
Well, I can share some stories, and I'll do that at a later time on just the racing community always comes together. It always comes together, and they always support other racers. They support the veterans. They support disabilities. I even have stories where the racing community was involved in trying to get, our military and some people out of Afghanistan during the fall of Kabul. And so, I can tell you some stories about that, and I'll do that another time. But yeah, the racing community, like we said, it's a global community. It's very small. It's very tight. But man, if something happens or if you need something, you can call a racer.
Yeah. And it's ironic because they're the most competitive people on the planet. And yet when push comes to shove and there's something that needs to be done, there's help that's needed, they will be they will be there in an instant, and they forget the fact that on the track, they're rivals and fierce rivals, and yet off the track, it's anything but.
Please share a great book that you've read, an article, or something you've watched that you believe others can learn from.
I'm actually reading it right now, and it's called The Power of Patience. And in this day and age, and I know I'm reading it for myself, because sometimes it's very easy in this extremely fast moving world to lose your patience. And when you lose your patience, you're not thinking clearly. You're not doing the analysis that needs to be done. You're not making the proper decisions because you're pressured, you're stressed, you're tense, you're whatever it is. This book, what's great about it is it's not any kind of, there's no grand formula that you need to use. You essentially have to remind yourself to stand, to kind of like pull back a little bit and calm it all down, and then, think things through and then make your decision. Perfect example is an email. You get an email from somebody and you absolutely disagree to the point where you're angry.
Right.
So first thing you want to do is immediately respond. And that's probably the worst thing that you could do. Being patient and, for example, saying, you know what, I am going to put this aside. I'll take a look at it again in the morning. And then quite often in that time difference, you realize that either this person has a good point or whatever it is. Even if you still disagree, you will tend to answer in a way that is, you'll get a better response from the other side than if you had just blasted something out immediately, and that's all about patience. And that's something I'm learning. I have a father that's 88 years old, and I have to learn to be patient sometimes. Sometimes I might push things, and it's a skill. It's just something you have to remind yourself about. And I sometimes don't. So I specifically got this book, and it's been great. And I highly recommend it to everybody, because it's, like I said, it's not a big, complicated thing. It's a lot of it's just reminding you about how being patient will help you in the long run. And it's just something you have to remind yourself to do. And you can't
make decisions on emotion. You can't act on emotion. You got to step back and be
right.
Please give our listeners a final parting words of wisdom and advice about life or business. Do you have, and we talked a little bit earlier, but you had mentioned a quote. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra that has meaning to you?
Well, I do. That one from Ross Braun, luck is preparation, waiting for an opportunity. I think that's really key, because things happen sometimes where you don't expect it. Opportunities present themselves where you might not be, might not expect it. But the key thing is to be prepared in whatever that would mean to you, so that when the opportunity does come up, that you act on it. Because there is nothing worse, in our lifetimes, to have been presented with an opportunity, and for whatever reason that you thought at the time made sense, but you didn't take advantage of it. And you'll hear drivers talk about this constantly. How did you get this drive? I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. The opportunity was presented to me and I took it. And then look what happened. I'm here now. So I say just do it. And that's part of it. But really, it is be prepared for any opportunity, but more importantly, act on the opportunity when it comes up, because it might never come up again. And that could be your one shot. So, take it, just do it. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, at least you can tell yourself, I gave it my best shot. The opportunity came up. I gave it my best shot. It didn't work out. That's fine. I learned from that. And then when the next opportunity comes up, I will know how to approach it differently this time. So I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, it's the now I know. Now I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally, Mark, tell us the best way that our listeners can learn more about you and your business, your website, your social media contact, LinkedIn, or the best means of contact that you would like to provide public.
Motorsportprospects.com is definitely the best way to, you can contact me through there. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So look up Mark Boudreau, LLB, my legal designation, and would be glad to connect with anybody there. You can email me, mark@motorsportprospects.com, and I'm always open to discussing pretty much anything and everything, certainly related to motorsport. I do respond to all emails, to any connection requests. Look, we all love motorsport. I can talk about racing for hours and hours and hours, just like everybody else in motorsport. So if it even is just to talk about racing, I'd be glad to. I haven't really released my schedule for the summer, but for sure, I'll be at the Toronto IndyCar race. And, if you're going to be there, please reach out and we'll get together and grab a drink or just have a quick chat and shake hands. And, I'm always open to that. So I would say motorsportprospects.com would be your best spot. There you will see all the links to my LinkedIn and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But LinkedIn really is where I do most of if I'm going to do social media, which I'm not a big fan of, LinkedIn is the place that I tend to do it.
Listeners, you can find links to everything we've talked about here today at carsyeah.com on the Mark Boudreau link on the notes page. Mark, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and sharing your experience with our listeners. And again, I've leaned on you and still going to lean on you on some prospects I'm working on and projects I'm working on. And so I want to thank you so much. And I really enjoyed having you on. I've always learned so much when I talk to you.
Oh, I really appreciate the kind words. Thanks so much. It's been great being on the podcast.
Well, on that note, until we talk again, I will see you down the road.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find today's guest show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up. It's an ebook filled with gorgeous photos of fuel filler fun, including quotes from our inspiring automotive enthusiasts. While you're on the website, sign up for weekly blogs and a whole lot more. Download your copy today, and Ginger will see you next time here on Cars Yeah.